I will, if I may so, thank again Jean-Luc Lénas very much for this fascinating first talk of today's event. And we lead over directly to our second speaker today, again on the first big question, creation, or how did the world come into being? So, and this is, of course, Alberto Ross, who is professor of metaphysics at the Universidad Panamericana in Mexico City. And he also is co-founder of the MA program in ancient philosophy at the same university. Alberto received his PhD at the Universidad de Navarra in Spain in 2006 and the UNAM in Mexico in 2008. He was a postdoctoral fellow at the Centre Léon Robin at the Sorbonne in Paris. Now, Alberto has published very widely on ancient philosophy and philosophers, including Plato, Aristotle, Alexander of Aphrodisias, Philoponus, and Simplicius, to name just a few. His thematic interests range from divine causality to cosmology, to motion, to ethics, and much more. Alberto, it is my tremendous pleasure to hand the word to you with a talk on God, creation, and causality in ancient philosophy.
Thank you so much, Katja, and thank you so much to the organizers. Well, Katja, Alexander, and Michael for the invitation to participate in this interesting exercise. I'm very glad to be here to talk about the notion of creation in antiquity and to explore the commensurability of ancient and modern doctrines. Yeah, perfect. Well, in the context of the big questions that frame our conversation, I will present a reconstruction of some of the most relevant positions on this topic in ancient philosophy. In particular, I will talk about the position of Plato, Aristotle, and the Greek commentator Simplicius. I will try to show the tensions between the Platonic and the Aristotelian explanation of the eternity of the world or the creation of the world, but I also will present the attempt of Simplicius to conciliate them. If I'm not wrong, Michael will explain more details about the Neoplatonic reception of the Platonic and the Aristotelian proposal. So I will just mention some remarks about the approach of this ancient commentator to illustrate the contrast between different kinds of reconstructions of the text that I will refer to. Well, first, I will present the formulation of the problem in Plato. He introduces the discussion about the origin of the cosmos in the following terms. This passage is very well known, and he asks if has it always been without any source of becoming, or has it come to be starting from some beginning? The formulation of this problem and its influence on posterior tradition is well known. In fact, we could say that the Platonic cosmology is introduced as a kind of answer to them. And in order to establish his position on this topic, Plato claims the following. He says that it has come to be, for it can be seen and touched, and it has body, and all such things are sensible. And as we saw, sensible things that are to be apprehended by belief together with sensation are things that become and can be generated. This argument introduces an explanation about the origin of the cosmos, which is based on different kinds of premises. Its structure can be logically reconstructed as follows. The first premise is everything that is sensible, that can be seen and touched and has a body, is a thing that has become and can be generated. The second premise is the cosmos is sensible and has a body. Therefore, the cosmos is a thing that has become and can be generated. About this argument, we can point out that it proceeds from a generalization about the nature of bodies and sensible things, namely that all of them are generated. Given that assumption, and since Plato identifies the cosmos as a body, he infers that the cosmos must be generated. Obviously, Plato knows that the human intellect does not have a complete experience of the cosmos and its history. But according to him, our personal and particular experience is enough to describe it as something corporeal. Once this point has been established, the second step of the argument continues as follows. In this passage, we can see that Plato introduced the principle of causality, no? And the argument could be reconstructed in the following way. The conclusion of the last argument could be the premise of the next one. And we say that, therefore, the cosmos is a thing that has become and can be generated. And the new premise is that everything that becomes must become by the agency of some cause. Therefore, the cosmos must become by the agency of some cause. In this argument, Plato introduces the principle of causality to demonstrate the need for a universal cause of the cosmos, I mean the demiurge. If the cosmos is something generated, there should be a cause of this generation, because nothing comes from nothing. Having established this conclusion, he observes the difficulty of finding the cosmic cause and the impossibility of communicating it to all mankind. This is a very important remark when it comes to defining the epistemological limits of Platonic physics or cosmology. We can aspire only to a probable discourse about the cosmos, and we should not look for any kind of certainty. These are the passages that refer to this thesis. The explanation, the Platonic explanation of the origin of the cosmos continues by identifying the creator's motive. And the reason is that he was good, no? And in the good, not jealously in any matter can ever arise. According to Plato, no? According to this passage, we could say that God is responsible for creating and order the world, desire its existence, because he has a kind of generosity that leaves no space for jealousy. Simplicius, by the way, refers to this passage to identify a teleological element in Plato, no? Because if God is good, he should be a kind of teleological element or a final cause for the world in a way. Desiring that all things should be good and perfect insofar as it is possible, this God took over all that was in discordant and disorderly motion and brought it from disorder into order, because this was better in every way. This is the passage where Plato explains the way that the demiurge create the world in a way. It's not a creation ex nihilo, because God took over all that is visible, not at rest, but it's a kind of creation, no? in another sense. And curiously, the result of this action will be a particular being composed of body and soul. The God designed the cosmos, and he fashioned reason within soul and soul within body, to the end that the work he accomplished might be, by nature, as excellent and perfect as possible. The dialogue establishes that this universe is an image of an intelligible model, and that is an animal endowed with a soul and body. And in fact, it's a single visible animal. The Platonic description of the universe as a living being or an animal composed of body and soul was not unfamiliar in the ancient world, okay, although it contained original inputs. Well, this is the description of the body and the soul of the cosmos. I'm going to skip this part, but it's interesting to see the way that Plato understands the nature of cosmos as an animal. But then we have an interesting passage because Plato, having established this description of the cosmos, he points out that when the Father of the universe saw his creation in motion and alive, he rejoiced, and being well placed, took it upon himself to make it yet more like its pattern. This is the passage. But given that it was impossible to confer eternity in full completeness on the generated thing, the God made a moving likeness of eternity, the time, an everlasting likeness that moves according to number. Well, this part of the discussion is, or of this part of the dialogue is relevant because it introduced a problem or an exegetical criterion of interpreting the dialogue, for interpreting the dialogue, because, well, Plato argues that there were no days and nights, months or years before heaven came into being. This was so because these are parts of time, and because was and shall be are forms of time that have come into being. It's thus a mistake to transfer them unthinkingly to the eternal being. If this is correct, the literal interpretation of the dialogue will not be the most appropriate one, and several options arise as a result. One of the most important issues concerns the status of the principle of the cosmos as presented by Plato at the beginning of the Timaeus. The created God, whom Plato calls the demiurge, is an eternal God. He is responsible for the coming into being and the continuous existence of the universe. However, it seems that it is possible to say a non-literal interpretation of these passages following the indication of Plato. Well, we must remember that in the book Laws number 10, in Laws 10, Plato discusses the problem of empyry and, well, acebeia, no? And tries to refute the position of those who reject the existence of the gods. And in those passages, his strategy is to show the priority of the soul with respect to the body. Plato identifies the philosophers of nature as interlocutors because they argue that all things that have been born are products of nature, whereas other things may be products of art or chance. As far as the gods are concerned, Plato maintains that philosophers of nature will define them as products of art, a view that has several implications. In his view, the cause of philosophical atheism is a misunderstanding of the nature of the soul, concerning in particular its nature and its priority with respect to the four elements. The soul is the movement that can move. And if we analyze this strategy in connection with the corollary of the Timaeus about time, it is rational to defend the claim that the first principle of nature for Plato is a kind of cosmic soul. In Laws 10, he does not refer to the demiurge to criticize atheism, but the priority of the soul. Well, I'm going to leave open this question, but I will mention later the interpretation of Aristotle on that point and the reception of this dialogue in Simplicius that give place to an interesting notion of creation and a very, very interesting discussion. No? But well, this is the big picture of the Platonic position. No? We have two different interpretations, the literal interpretation of Plato and the non-literal interpretation of the dialogue. And in one case, we can find the notion of creation in a way, but in the other interpretation, if the first principle is the soul of the cosmos, we can discuss if this is a kind of creation or not. Some philosophers defend, well, one way to reconstruct the dialogue between Aristotle and Plato is just to show the tension between both interpretations, because Aristotle read the dialogue in some passages as a literal interpretation, but we find other passages where Aristotle defends a non-literal interpretation of the dialogue. Well, I would like to present the big picture of the Aristotelian doctrine of the eternity of motion and the role that the prime mover plays in this cosmological doctrine. First of all, well, it is important to remember the object of inquiry, in the case of the Aristotelian physics. According to this first passage, the object of inquiry is motion. because, well, nature is a principle of motion and change, and if we want to study nature, we have to study motion, because nature is a principle of motion. And well, Physics 8 is not an exception, the last book of the physics, because Aristotle continues this research outlined, and he proposes the discussion of the eternity of motion in the following terms. No, it's the second passage of the presentation. Well, I'm going to skip the passage, but these are the questions that Aristotle introduced. No, in the first of all, was there ever becoming of motion before which it had not been, and is it perishing again so as to leave nothing in motion, or are we to say that it never had any becoming and it's not perishing, but always was and always will be? Well, it is well known that Aristotle defends a thesis according to which motion is eternal, and he offers different arguments to support it, and some of them come from his own definition of motion or time, for example. Well, I can present all the details of these arguments, but I would like to explain their implication. In general, the strategy of Aristotle is to prove that that if we study motions since its definition, we arrive to the conclusion that for any change, there will be a previous one. This is one of the arguments that Aristotle introduced. But well, he has many arguments to defend this position. I'm going to skip this part. And because I would like to talk about the implications of this conception of the motion as something eternal. And so, well, given that motion is eternal, Aristotle opened the following discussion. He explored all these possibilities. Either all things are always at rest, or all things are always in motion, or some things are in motion and other at rest. And well, in this case, we can open other three options. Either the things that are in motion are always in motion, and the things that are at rest are always at rest, or they are all naturally capable of motion and of rest, or there is yet a third possibility remaining it. Maybe it's that some things in the world are always motionless, or other always in motion, while other again admit of both conditions. And well, we know that the last one is the account that Aristotle will defend, because we have something that are always motionless, the prime mover. We have other things that is always in motion, the heaven, and the sublunary world that participate of motion and rest. So the last one is the account of the matter that Aristotle adopts. Aristotle postulates an absolute unmoved mover in Physics 8. His path to that conclusion follows several steps. The first, which is pointing out the necessity of a first principle for all change. In this context, Physics 7.1 and 8.5 contain the main arguments that prove the need for a prime mover. And looking at the arguments set forth in both books, we find that the general argument is the same, although the justification for one of the fundamental premises seems to differ. The demonstration in both passages runs as follows. If everything that moves is moved by something, the series of movers and things moved must be either finite or infinite. Everything that moves is moved by something. The series mover things moved must be either finite or infinite, from 1 and 2, and the series mover things things moved cannot be infinite. Then the series mover things move is finite. There must be a prime mover from 3 and 4. Well, the structure of the argument is very simple, since everything that moves is moved.
Alberto, we have 10 more minutes in the slot, including questions. So you decide whenever you want to stop, or if you want to go for the entire time and also talk about Simplicius.
Okay, perfect.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you, Katja. Yeah, so maybe I can skip some parts. Well, just maybe just one thing that I would like to emphasize is that when Aristotle introduced the necessity of a prime mover, then Aristotle criticized a position according to which someone defend the thesis. Aristotle criticized someone to say that the prime mover could be a soul, no? And it seems that Aristotle is criticizing the position of Plato in this dialogue, or the non-literal interpretation of Plato. But I can skip this part, and maybe Aristotle is very well known for everyone. So I'm going to skip to Simplicius, because, well, despite of despite of the tensions between Aristotle and Plato, some ancient commentators try to prove the perfect harmony or symphony between Plato and Aristotle. One of them is Simplicius, who commented very carefully every part of Aristotle's physics, and at the end of his commentary, he introduces a declaration or a corollary to this book. In those passages, he discusses the problem of the causality of the Aristotelian prime mover in the following terms. I'm going to skip this part, but I want to point out the explanation that Simplicius introduced to say that for Aristotle and Plato, God is an efficient cause and also a final cause. And, well, Simplicius offered different textual evidences. He refers to this passage of the Timaeus that we have seen before. And, well, for Aristotle, he follows his teacher Ammonius. No? Simplicius says that his teacher Ammonius had written an entire book that provides many proofs that the fact that Aristotle considers God to be also the efficient cause of the entire world. Unfortunately, the book is lost, but Simplicius refers to some of the arguments that Ammonius offered. It's also, Simplicius also refers to evidential, to different texts. For example, when Aristotle says that neither God or nature does anything in vain, it's a very well-known thesis of Aristotle. And he says, well, if we attribute a poie to Aristotle, we have to say that he's a poieticon principle. But one thing that is very, very interesting is the explanation that Simplicius offered to say why Aristotle didn't mention that God is an efficient cause. Let me go to this part. Simplicius says that this wonderful man, Aristotle, seems to me clearly to refuse to apply the term generation to perpetual things, because the imagination easily suggests a temporal origin for things that are said to be generated. And this is precisely the mistake many have made in their inability to comprehend perpetual creation in their thoughts. Nevertheless, Simplicius emphasized that Aristotle does not refuse to call motion eternal, even though motion has its existence in coming to be. But he does not choose to call generation perpetual as applying to the same thing, because what is generated seems to be generated not having existed previously and tends to perish afterwards. This remark is important because we have seen that Simplicius has a controversy try to conciliate the Platonic proposal with the Aristotelian one, and this is the way that Simplicius tried to show that even if it seems that Aristotle only think that the prime mover is a final cause, we could say that he's also an efficient cause and he's a creator, but he tried to he avoid this the use of this term because in order to avoid a confusion. So, well, this is the big picture of the explanation, and thank you very much. And sorry for the technical problems a few minutes ago. Thank you.